At the edge of the Pacific, thousands of kilometers away from anywhere, lies a speck of land. Pitcairn Island, an island just 3.5 by 1.8 kilometers wide. Inside, barely 40 people, fewer than would fit on a single city bus. Outside, water stretching for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. The nearest land is Ono, 140 kilometers away, a sandy atoll, no people here. Henderson Island, 200 kilometers away, is larger, but no people. Ducie, 540 kilometers away, same. All three, Owano, Henderson, and Ducie, all belong to the Pitcairn Islands group, but only Pitcairn among them is alive, and its 40 residents are alone. They have no airport, no port, no real connection to the outside world. The nearest inhabited place is Mangareva, a village of about 1,200 people in French Polynesia, 550 kilometers away. Yet Pitcairn is not part of French Polynesia. It is administered by New Zealand, 5,500 kilometers distant, but legally it's a British overseas territory with its sovereign state, the United Kingdom, nearly 15,000 kilometers away. On Pitcairn Island, there is no hospital, just a tiny clinic, staffed by a single nurse, no ambulance, no helicopter that can rescue the islanders in case of emergency. If someone falls ill, a fast rescue depends on what fast can mean in a place like this. In 2009, for example, a woman needed urgent hospitalization. First, she was taken by boat to Mangareva, 36 hours across open sea. Once in Mangareva, though, a problem. Mangareva's airport runs only one flight per week, and only to Tahiti, French Polynesia. So she waited days. From Tahiti, she boarded another flight to New Zealand. Only there, after 6,600 kilometers, 4,100 miles, could she be treated in a real hospital. She was lucky. The whole journey took less than a week. It could easily have taken 2. This is what very fast means on Pitcairn. And not just that, actually. Here, everything we consider normal moves at a very different pace. Life on Pitcairn, in fact, is unlike anywhere else. On the island, there is only one store, the general store, and one post office. Both are stocked only once every 3 months, when a supply ship from New Zealand arrives. But remember, there is no port, so as the supply ship cannot dock, islanders must row out in longboats and load the cargo piece by piece to bring it to the shore. But if the sea is too rough, there is no backup plan. If they cannot reach the ship, they wait another 3 months. Prices in the general store are absurd. A jar of peanut butter costs $15. A bottle of shampoo, 3 times the price in New Zealand. Fresh fruit and vegetables depend on what the islanders can grow. If crops fail, they go without. Mail arrives only with the supply ship, 4 to 6 times a year. A letter sent from Pitcairn may take 6 months to reach its destination to the outside world. Internet exists, but barely. In the 2010s, speeds were just 1 megabit per second. Then 5, when the British government installed a 4G LTE tower on the island. Today, Starlink provides faster service, but it is fragile and connection drops are constant. Electricity comes from diesel generators. They run only part of the day. Islanders rely on solar panels for 95% of their power. There is only one electrician to maintain all of this, and he is 70 years old now. Water comes from the rain. Every house has a tank. In droughts, the tanks run dry. There are no cars, only quad bikes and tractors running over unpaved tracks. Social life is limited. Family gatherings, a small church, some fishing, the occasional yacht or cruise ship docking every few days in high season, one bar and an Italian pizzeria. This is Pitcairn, a place where time moves differently, where life demands patience, where every day is ruled by limits most of us would find unbearable. But behind all these bizarre logistical nightmares lay something horrific: abuse. On an island this small, so far from the rest of the world, imagine if someone falls victim to another islander, do they have an escape? In the early 2000s, whispers of abuse and growing suspicion pushed the United Kingdom to launch an investigation on the island. What it uncovered shocked the world. Hundreds of charges were filed. At the end of the trials, a prison was built on the island itself, and nearly half of Pitcairn's men were found guilty and jailed for abusing underage girls, some barely in their teens, conditioning them to believe that was a normal thing. The story of Pitcairn begins not with its 40 islanders today, but with Britain's empire in the 18th century. In the late 1700s, the British were searching for a cheap way to feed enslaved Africans on their Caribbean plantations. The idea was simple. Find a crop that could grow in poor soil, produce calories cheaply, and be shipped across the oceans. In Tahiti, Polynesia, they found one, the breadfruit. When cooked, it had a texture like bread. It seemed perfect for the task. So in 1787, Britain launched an expedition, His Majesty's Armed Vessel Bounty. Its mission was to sail to Tahiti, collect hundreds of breadfruit trees, and carry them to the Caribbean. But sailing from England to the Pacific was no simple task. Crossing the storm-ridden Drake Passage at the tip of South America was too dangerous for wooden ships. Instead, the Bounty took the much longer road, south across the Atlantic, around the Cape of Good Hope, then into the Indian Ocean, and finally the Pacific, a detour of 10,000 kilometers. When the ship finally reached Tahiti in 1788, the crew stayed for 5 months to collect and prepare the breadfruit plants. In that time, many sailors grew attached to Tahiti's people, especially to its women. To the British sailors, Tahitian women seemed unusually free in their sexuality compared to rigid 18th century Europe. Relationships between crewmen and local women quickly became intimate and intense. When the Bounty was ready to sail again, discipline collapsed. Just weeks into the voyage, in April 1789, a group of mutineers led by Fletcher Christian seized control of the ship in what became known as the Mutiny on the Bounty. Captain William Bligh and his loyalists were cast adrift in a small boat. The mutineers turned back toward Polynesia, but they knew they could not remain in Tahiti. The Royal Navy would surely find and punish them. So Christian and a small group of followers, 7 mutineers in total, 12 Polynesian women, and several Polynesian men, searched for a hiding place. In 1790, they found an island uninhabited and mischarted on naval maps. Pitcairn. It had first been sighted in 1767 by Robert Pitcairn, a 15-year-old midshipman. Once on Pitcairn, the mutineers burned the Bounty to hide any trace of their presence. But life was no paradise. Tensions quickly broke out between the European mutineers and the Polynesian men who had been brought against their will. Disputes over women and resources turned violent. Within a decade, most of the mutineers were dead, murdered in clashes, while the Polynesian men were killed in retaliation. By 1800, only one mutineer, John Adams, remained alive, surrounded by the Polynesian women and their children. When a ship of the Royal Navy finally rediscovered Pitcairn, the officers watched from their deck, staring at the tiny village, and debated, what should be done with these people? By then, most of the original mutineers were gone, dead from conflict, drink, or disease. There was no one left to punish. On the contrary, the officers were impressed by what they saw. The colony, born from crime, was still standing, so it was left alone. And so Pitcairn survived, small, fragile, isolated in the middle of nowhere, yet still under British rule. Its population rose and fell dramatically over the centuries. At its peak in the 1850s, the island had almost 200 residents before disease and waves of emigration to New Zealand and Australia reduced the number to as few as 16. Pitcairn became a paradox, a community born out of mutiny, marked by violence, yet held together by family ties and love. For centuries it existed at the edge of the map, barely remembered, until in the 2000s it was suddenly thrust back into the spotlight, not for its romantic mutineer past, but for a modern-day scandal, one that still had to do with love, but not between consenting adults. Instead, it was between adult men and underage children. For decades, the girls and women of Pitcairn whispered about abuse. Outsiders who visited sometimes heard fragments of stories, but nothing ever came of it. That changed in 1999 when P.C. Gail Cox, a British policewoman from Kent on a temporary assignment to Pitcairn, received a shocking confession. A 15-year-old girl, Belinda, told her she had been raped by a visitor to the island. That alone was serious, but then she added, "I have also been raped by other men, here, on this island." Her words broke the silence and raised a question. Had generations of girls been raped on Pitcairn? This disclosure triggered Operation Unique, a joint British and New Zealand investigation. Over the next 2 years, detectives contacted every woman who had lived on Pitcairn in the previous 20 years. They tracked them down in New Zealand, Australia, and Britain. What they heard was horrifying. Every single woman interviewed reported sexual abuse. Some said it began when they were only 3 years old. Many described assaults at age 7, 8, or 10, and in most cases, the perpetrators were not strangers. They were male relatives. One victim later testified, "On Pitcairn, it was like you just gave in, because it was normal. You didn't question it." Another said, "If you said no, you were shamed, or people laughed at you. We were taught this is what happens here." By the early 2000s, prosecutors had built their case. Around 55 charges were filed. In 2004, 7 men, nearly a third of the island's adult male population, were brought to trial. Among them was the mayor, Steve Christian. The trials took place on Pitcairn itself, in a makeshift courtroom. Victims testified by video link from New Zealand. In the end, 6 of the 7 men were convicted on more than 30 charges. The longest sentence was 6 years. The trials did not end there. In 2007, Sean Christian and Brian Young faced additional charges in a special sitting of the Pitcairn Supreme Court in New Zealand. They too were convicted. In total, 10 men, almost half the island's adult male population, were found guilty. The men tried 2 main defenses. First, they argued British law did not apply to Pitcairn, claiming the island had never been properly annexed. Their appeal went all the way to the UK Privy Council in 2006. The court rejected it, ruling that Pitcairn had been a British possession since 1838, and its people had always been subject to British law. Second, some claimed that sex with underage girls was a local custom. Steve Christian himself said, "This is how it's always been done here." The judges dismissed this outright. The UK Privy Council wrote, "These are not customs, these are crimes." At the end of the trials, Pitcairn had no prison, so Britain built one. A 6-cell jail was constructed on the island, along with a new police station. Corrections officers were flown in from New Zealand. A permanent police presence was established. First rotating officers, later a single New Zealand constable living on the island full-time. Even the prison reflected the strange reality of Pitcairn. The men were free by day to farm and fish, but locked in at night. Later, some were moved to home detention. By 2009, the last inmate had left. The prison stood empty. At one point, officials even considered turning it into tourist accommodation. Once, Pitcairn was remembered as the island of the Bounty mutineers. Now it is remembered also for something else, not just for its rebellion against the UK, not just for surviving in the middle of nowhere, but also for generations of abuse. A colony born from love and crime, still marked by it.